Get Monica up to speed. It's the most valuable thing someone at your level can do. He handed my project to his boss and told me to train my replacement. So the following Monday, I called the board vote I quietly controlled and removed him. There are 9 seats on the board of Halcyon Systems, and on the last Thursday of March 2025, I quietly controlled 5 of them. Todd Brenner did not know that. He knew me as Harper Maddox, principal engineer, grade L6, base salary $195,000, the woman who sat in the third cubicle from the window and drank cold coffee out of a chipped enamel mug. That afternoon, he leaned one hand on the top of my monitor. I remember the smell of his cologne, something with sandalwood, and the way the fluorescent tube above my desk buzzed at a frequency that had annoyed me for 4 years. And he told me that corporate wanted fresh eyes on Project Atlas, that Monica Reyes was taking point, and that he needed me to get her fully up to speed by the end of the quarter. I asked him what my role would be after that. He smiled the way he smiled at all hands meetings, wide and rehearsed, and he said, "Think of it as mentorship, Harper. Honestly, it's the most valuable thing someone at your level can do." Then he tapped my monitor twice with his knuckle, like he was knocking on a door he already owned, and he walked back to his corner office to prepare the slides he'd present to Raymond Vance the following week. My slides, my architecture, my 2 years of work, with my name scrubbed off the bottom of every page. I did not say anything. I picked up the mug, and I drank the cold coffee, and I let him go. Here is what Todd Brenner did not understand, standing there with his hand on my monitor. The woman he was firing in slow motion was not a woman he had any power over at all. He thought he was holding all the leverage. He was holding a knife by the blade and smiling at me across the handle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To make you feel what I felt that Monday in the boardroom, I have to take you back, 9 years back, to a machine shop in Youngstown, Ohio, and to a man who taught me that the person who owns the tooling owns the argument. My father, Walt Maddox, was a tool and die machinist for 31 years. He made $8.40 an hour when I was born in 1985, and his knees gave out in 2016 after 31 years on the same concrete floor. He kept a brass slide rule in his shirt pocket every day of his working life, a K&E Decilon he'd bought used in 1974 for $11, and he used it to check the shop foreman's math out loud in front of the other men whenever the foreman tried to shave a tolerance to save the company money. "Numbers don't get intimidated, Harper," he told me. "People do. Be a number." When he died in 2018, the only thing I took from the house was that slide rule. It has lived on my desk ever since, next to the mug, and I have used it exactly the way he used his, to check other people's math while they thought I wasn't paying attention. I got out of Youngstown on a scholarship to Carnegie Mellon, class of 2007, computer science, $31,000 a year that I did not have and paid back over 11 years. I was good, not loud, just good. In 2013, I co-founded a company called Sendrick Labs with 2 other engineers, a data orchestration platform that did something dull and enormously valuable. It made messy corporate data usable without an army of consultants. We were 4 people in a rented room above a bakery in Pittsburgh for 3 years, and the whole building smelled of cinnamon at 6 in the morning. I wrote the core engine. It was mine, the way a house is the carpenter's. I knew every joint. In 2019, Halcyon Systems bought Sendrick Labs for $47 million. My share, after taxes and after paying off my partner's preferences, came to just under $31 million. I was 34 years old, and I had more money than my father had earned in his entire life, several times over. I want to be honest about something, because it is the hinge of this whole story. I did not have to work another day. But I had spent 6 years building one thing, and I was not finished learning how a company like Halcyon actually worked from the inside, how the money moved, who really made decisions, where the rot was. So I made an unusual deal, and Karen Delgado, my attorney and my oldest friend, structured it. We had met in 2011 in a laundromat on Murray Avenue, both of us folding sheets at 11 at night, and she had been the smartest person I knew for 14 years running. The deal had two parts. Part one, I took a board seat. As part of the acquisition, I rolled a portion of my proceeds back into Halcyon equity and, over the next 2 years, quietly acquired more, until I personally held 6.2% of a company then valued at $1.9 billion. That stake, plus a shareholders agreement Karen wrote like a Swiss watch, gave me an independent director's seat and the 9-person board. I sat under my initials, H. Maddox, listed as the designee of a holding entity called Desalon LLC, named, of course, for the slide rule. Part 2, the part nobody understood. I asked to keep working, on the floor, as an engineer, grade L6. I wanted to see the company the way the people inside it saw it, not the way it was described in the polished decks that reached the board. So there were, functionally, two Harper Maddoxes. There was H. Maddox, independent director, who attended 4 board meetings a year, said little, read everything, and whom most of the operating staff had never met because directors and line engineers simply do not cross paths at a company of 4,000 people. And there was Harper from the third cubicle, who wrote code and drank cold coffee and got told to train her replacement. Todd knew the second one. He had never once been in a room with the first. I met Todd Brenner in early 2021 when Halcyon reorganized and my product group landed under him. Todd was 44, a smooth operator with a good jaw and a Wharton MBA he mentioned roughly once a week. And I'll tell you the truth because it matters. For the first 18 months, he was fine. Better than fine. He fought to get my team an extra 4 headcount in 2021. He backed my push to rebuild the Atlas pipeline when 3 other directors called it a waste. In December 2021, he stood up at the division dinner at the Halcyon Tower, 41 floors of downtown glass, and toasted my team by name. And I remember thinking, this one might actually be decent. I filed that away too. I file everything. That is the thing people forget about a slow betrayal. It doesn't start as a betrayal. It starts as a partnership, and that is exactly why it cuts the way it does. The first wrong note came in June 2023. We were in a status review, 11 of us, around the long table in conference room 4B, and I laid out the Atlas roadmap. The internal projection was that the platform could generate $120 million in new annual revenue within 3 years by cutting the company's data integration costs. Todd nodded along. Then, in the meeting recap he sent to Raymond Vance, the CEO, a recap I was copied on only because Priya Nair, our junior engineer, forwarded it to me, the roadmap had become Todd's cost transformation initiative. Not the team's, not mine, his. It was one word. I noticed it the way you notice a hairline crack in a windshield. You know it is going to spread. Priya was 26. She joined us out of Georgia Tech in 2022, and she had the specific gift of noticing things and the specific fear of saying them out loud. She forwarded me that recap with no comment, just the email and a single line. Did you see the framing? Maybe it's nothing. It was not nothing, and we both knew it. And the fact that a 26-year-old 3 levels below Todd could see it, and he assumed no one would, that told me who he was. The second note was in October 2023. Todd started scheduling the Atlas syncs without me and looping me in for the technical portion. His phone began living face down on the table in every meeting, and twice I watched him tilt it up, read a message, and go quiet. He started saying leadership a lot, as in leadership wants, as a wall between me and whatever room the real decisions were happening in. He took Monica Reyes to the Q4 planning offsite in Scottsdale and did not take me, though I owned the roadmap being planned. Monica had been hired in August 2023, a program manager with a talent for standing near important work and a way of saying we that always seemed to mean Todd and I. The third note was money, which is how I knew it was serious, because with Todd, everything eventually became money. In January 2024, the annual comp cycle came through. My team of 9 had shipped Atlas Phase 1 4 weeks early. My rating came back meets expectations, a 2 on a 5-point scale, with a merit increase of 2.1% and a note in the calibration comments, which I later read in full, that said, "Strong builder, ceiling as a leader, better utilized as an individual contributor." Todd wrote that. I know his phrasing. Meanwhile, Todd's own bonus that year, which I saw 11 months later in the compensation committee packet, was $250,000 on a base of $410,000, and the single largest justification listed was, I am quoting the packet, "successful delivery and executive positioning of Project Atlas." Executive positioning. He'd taken the thing I built, walked it up to Raymond Vance's office on the 41st floor, and gotten a $250,000 bonus for carrying it in a nice folder. I did not scream. I have never once screamed at work. I went home to my apartment on the 14th floor. I'd bought it in 2020, 900 square feet, a view of the river I looked at maybe 6 times a year. And I made a grilled cheese and drank a lukewarm beer I'd forgotten in the door of the fridge. And I watched 2 episodes of a home renovation show where people knock down walls. And I sat with it. Not the anger, the information. Because anger is loud and information is patient. And I had learned from Walt Maddox that you do not swing at the foreman the first time he shaves a tolerance. You write down the number and you wait, and you let him do it in front of enough people that when the part fails, everyone already knows whose math it was. The boiling point came the last Thursday of March 2025. Todd had a chance he'd been circling for a year. Raymond Vance was retiring at 63. The CEO search was on, and Halcyon's president role, the number 2 seat, and a great deal more money in equity than he already had, was open. Todd wanted it, and his whole pitch to the board and to Raymond was going to be Atlas, the platform now live across the company, on track for that $120 million revenue impact, presented as the fruit of his vision. He had a leadership summit slot the following Wednesday, April 2nd, in the 41st floor boardroom in front of Raymond and the executive committee to make his case. There was only one problem for Todd. The person who actually understood Atlas, who could answer any real question about it, was me. And I was becoming inconvenient. Because I had started asking, in writing, in meetings, small factual questions with my name attached to them. Who owns this roadmap? Whose model produced the revenue figure? I was creating a paper record of authorship, and Todd, who had a Wharton MBA and no idea he was being managed, decided the cleanest solution was to make me disappear before the summit. So he handed Atlas to Monica. He told Monica to present the technical portions at the summit as the new owner, and he came to my desk on that Thursday, put his hand on my monitor, and told me to train her by end of quarter. Mentorship, the most valuable thing someone at my level could do. He wanted me to spend my last useful weeks teaching my replacement to recite my own work back to the executive committee so that he could be promoted on it. That was the offense, laid out plainly. It is almost elegant when you say it slowly. I said, of course. When does Monica want to start? And here is the cold composure part, the part I want you to understand exactly, because it was not a movie moment. There was no swelling music. I felt something in my chest go very quiet and very level, the way a shop goes quiet when a machine that has been running rough finally seizes. I did not decide to destroy Todd Brenner in that moment. I decided something smaller and much more dangerous. I decided to stop protecting him from the consequences of what he actually was. For 4 years, I had been carrying part of his weight, covering the technical gaps in his stories, letting the cost transformation initiative line slide, being a good soldier. I put the weight down. That was all. Everything after that was just gravity. I picked up the slide rule off my desk, and I ran my thumb along the cursor the way my father used to, and I went into the stairwell. I never trusted the elevator for a call like this. And I called Karen Delgado. "He did it," I said. "In writing?" she asked, because Karen always asks the right question first. "In writing," I said. "He told me to train my replacement so he can present Atlas to the executive committee next Wednesday and use it to get the president job." There was a pause on the line, and then Karen, who had folded sheets next to me in a laundromat 14 years earlier, said, "Okay, then let's talk about the calendar." The calendar was the whole game. Because here is the thing about a board of directors that people who have never sat on one do not understand. A senior executive like Todd is a corporate officer. The board appoints officers, and the board can remove them by a vote at a properly called board meeting. Todd could be promoted by Raymond Vance and the executive committee. That was the summit on Wednesday. But he could only be removed or kept or ended by the 9 people around the real table upstairs. And I was one of them. And over 4 years of sitting quietly in those 4 times a year meetings, reading everything and saying little, I had learned exactly who the other 8 were. Let me make this plain, because a listener should be able to hold it in one hand. Todd thought the board was the group he had to impress. He never once realized the board was already, quietly, mine to move. Over the next 10 days, I did not do a single dramatic thing. There is no scene where I shout. There is only preparation, which is the most satisfying part if you have the temperament for it. And I do. First, the evidence. I did not need to fabricate anything. I needed to organize the truth so that it could not be argued with. Priya Nair, my conscience, the 26-year-old who noticed things and feared saying them, had done something 2 years earlier that I will be grateful for as long as I live. When Todd's June 2023 recap turned our roadmap into Todd's Cost Transformation Initiative, Priya had been uneasy enough that she had quietly preserved the original, the design documents, the version history, the commit logs, every timestamp on the Atlas architecture, all showing authorship, all showing dates. Engineers leave fingerprints. Code is signed and dated down to the second. The entire skeleton of Atlas was stamped thousands of times over with my user ID going back to 2022, long before Todd ever said the word initiative. I asked Priya to meet me at a diner on 9th Street on a Saturday. I did not tell her everything. I told her I might be able to make sure the truth about Atlas was on the record, permanently, and I asked if she would stand behind the documents she'd saved. She stirred her coffee for a long time. She was afraid of Todd, of Monica, of being the junior person who spoke. And then she said, "He told me last week that I'd have a real future if I was a team player about the summit. I've been sick to my stomach for a year, Harper." She slid a USB drive across the table next to the sugar caddy. It's all there, the real timeline. I have never respected anyone more than I respected that 26-year-old in that vinyl booth, choosing to be a number instead of a coward. Second, the comp record and the paper trail, the meets expectations rating, the ceiling as a leader calibration comment in Todd's own words, the $250,000 bonus justified explicitly by executive positioning of Project Atlas. Karen and I assembled a single clean binder, 40 pages, no adjectives, just documents and dates. Numbers don't get intimidated. Third, and this is where Todd lost without ever knowing a game was being played, the votes. I spent those 10 days having 9 quiet conversations, coffees, a walk along the river, 1 phone call at 10 at night, with the other 8 directors and with Raymond Vance himself. I did not lobby. I do not lobby. I simply put the timeline in front of people whose entire professional reputation rested on Halcyon telling the truth to itself, and I let them read it. There was Eleanor Shaw, 71, former CFO of a Fortune 200 company, who had joined the board because she was tired of watching credit go to the loudest man in the room. There was David Okonkwo, the lead independent director, an engineer himself before he ran companies, who took one look at the commit logs and went very still. There was Raymond Vance, the retiring CEO, who had genuinely believed Atlas was Todd's, and whose face, when I showed him the 2022 timestamps, did something I will not forget: the particular shame of a smart man realizing he has been handled. "He walked it into my office," Raymond said quietly, "and he never once said your name." "No," I said, "he didn't." By Thursday, April 3rd, the day after Todd's triumphant summit, where Monica had stood in the 41st floor boardroom and presented my architecture from my slides, while Todd beamed and Raymond Vance sat with a folder in his lap that already contained the whole true story, I had 5 firm votes and a 6th leaning. You need 5 of 9. I had them before Todd had even finished celebrating. And then I did the one thing that a director can do and a principal engineer cannot. Under Halcyon's bylaws, any 2 directors may call a special meeting of the board. I had David Okonkwo, the lead independent director, join me. On Friday, April 4th, a notice went out to all 9 board members and to the corporate secretary for a special meeting the following Monday, April 7th, 8:30 a.m., 41st floor. One agenda item, in the flat language Karen and I chose on purpose: review of officer conduct and consideration of a vote of no confidence in Senior Vice President Todd Brenner. Todd got the notice because officers under review are notified. I know exactly when he got it, because at 4:52 that Friday afternoon, he appeared at my cubicle, and for the first time in 4 years, the smooth was gone off his face. He didn't know I was on the board yet. He thought this was some HR storm he could weather. "Harper," he said, and his voice had a crack in it, "I don't know what's happening upstairs, but if anyone asks you about Atlas, about the ownership stuff, you and I have always had a great working relationship, right? You're a builder. That's a compliment. I've always said that about you." He was frightened, and he was trying to buy me with the exact insult he'd used to bury me, and he could not even hear himself do it. I looked at him. I picked up the slide rule off my desk and put it in my bag, and I picked up the chipped enamel mug, empty now, and I said, "Have a good weekend, Todd." The following Monday, April 7th, 2025, at 8:30 in the morning, I walked into the 41st floor boardroom of Halcyon Systems for the first time not as H. Maddox on paper, but as myself, in front of everyone. The room is glass on 2 sides, 41 floors up, and that morning the light came off the river so hard that people were squinting. There is a walnut table that seats 20, and a sideboard with coffee in a steel urn and a plate of pastries no one ever eats. 8 directors were seated when I came in. Raymond Vance sat at the far end, and Todd Brenner was there, in the officer's chair against the wall, in his best Navy suit, with Monica Reyes beside him holding a laptop like a shield, because he had brought her to help him defend his project, still not understanding that the project was the least of his problems. I walked to the 9th seat at the table, the empty one, the one with the little folded card that said, H. Maddox, Director. I watched Todd's face as I sat down in it. I watched him look at the card, and then at me, and then at the card again, and I watched the arithmetic finally happen behind his eyes. 4 years of arithmetic, all at once. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Monica's laptop slid 2 inches down her lap. Here is the whole reveal in one sentence, the sentence I had waited 9 years to be able to say plainly. I wasn't his employee. I was one of the 9 people who could end his career, and I had already counted the votes. David Okonkwo called the meeting to order at 8:34. He noted the single agenda item. Then he turned to me, as was arranged, and said, Ms. Maddox, you requested this meeting. I did not make a speech. Walt Maddox did not make speeches to the foreman. He read out the number and let the number do the work. I opened the 40-page binder, and I walked the board through it in about 11 minutes, flat and forensic. The commit logs, timestamped 2022, my authorship. The June 2023 recap, where the roadmap became Todd's Cost Transformation Initiative. The 2024 calibration comment, in Todd's own words, strong builder, ceiling as a leader, rating the actual architect of Atlas a 2 out of 5. The $250,000 bonus, justified by executive positioning of Project Atlas. And finally, the instruction, 3 weeks old, to train my replacement so that Monica could present my work to this very board's executive committee and win Todd the president's chair. I laid each page flat on the walnut table as I finished with it, one after another, the way you lay out finished parts for inspection. Then I stopped talking, and the room was so quiet I could hear the steel coffee urn ticking as it cooled on the sideboard. Todd broke. Of course he broke. The powerful ones always turn out to be hollow when you finally rap your knuckle against them, the way he'd rapped his against my monitor. He stood up. He said my name 3 times. He said, "This is Harper. This is a misunderstanding. We built this together. I always intended..." And then he pivoted, because cowards always pivot, and he pointed at Priya's documents and said someone had manipulated the version history, which is a thing you cannot do to cryptographically signed commit logs. And David Okonkwo, who had written code for 11 years before Todd ever bought a suit, said quietly, "No, Todd, you can't. I checked them myself on Saturday." Todd looked at Raymond Vance for rescue, and Raymond, the man he had spent a year performing for, looked back at him with the flat disappointment of a father who has finally seen the report card and said only, "You walked it into my office, Todd. You never said her name." Monica Reyes set her laptop on the floor, stood up, and said, "I'd like it on the record that I was told the architecture was fully Todd's and that I had no knowledge of Ms. Maddox's authorship until this moment." Then she picked up her bag and asked if she could be excused, and no one stopped her. I did not hold it against her. She had stood near the wrong man. That is a smaller crime than being him. David Okonkwo called the vote at 8:51 a.m., a vote of no confidence in Senior Vice President Todd Brenner and a recommendation to the CEO for his immediate removal as an officer. It went around the table. Eleanor Shaw, in favor. David Okonkwo, in favor. Raymond Vance, in favor. 2 more, in favor. And me, the 9th seat, the woman from the 3rd cubicle, the builder with the ceiling. I said, in favor. And I looked at Todd Brenner while I said it, because Walt Maddox taught me you look a man in the eye when you read out the number that fails his part. 6-1 with 2 recusals. Todd Brenner was removed as an officer of Halcyon Systems at 8:53 a.m. on Monday, April 7, 2025. His $410,000 salary, his unvested equity, his president's chair, all of it stopped that morning in that light off the river. Security walked him to his office to collect a box, while the board moved to the next order of business, which was me. David Okonkwo formally proposed that the actual architect of Project Atlas be named to lead it. That vote was 9-0. He put his hand on my monitor and told me to train my replacement. 11 business days later, I sat in the 9th chair and ended his career in 19 minutes. I have thought a great deal about which of those 2 facts he found harder to believe, and I have decided it was the chair. That was 15 months ago. I did not stay to run Atlas long term. That was never who I am. I led it through the transition, hired Priya Nair into the senior role she'd earned, and stepped back to the board seat I'd held all along. Priya runs the platform now. Last quarter, it crossed $68 million in verified cost savings, well ahead of the roadmap I drew in a room above a bakery, in my head, years before it ever had a name. She sends me the numbers on the 1st of every month, with no comment, the way she once sent me that recap, except now the numbers are good. Todd Brenner, I'm told, landed a smaller title at a smaller firm 8 months later. He does not mention Halcyon on his profile anymore. I don't think about him much, which I understand is its own kind of ending. The man spends 4 years living in your chest, and then one Monday morning, he simply doesn't anymore. The people who stood by me, I keep close. Last month, the 4 of us had dinner at Karen Delgado's house. Karen, who structured the whole quiet architecture of it. Priya, who was 26 and afraid and chose to be a number anyway. And Eleanor Shaw, 71, who understood everything before I finished my first sentence. We ate too much, and Karen opened a bottle of wine that cost more than my father made in a week. And at some point, Karen raised her glass toward me and said, "To the builder." The whole table laughed, because they knew the word, and I raised the enamel mug I'd brought with me on purpose, the chipped one, the third cubicle one, and I let the insult be a toast. Strong builder, ceiling as a leader. Best 2 words anyone ever put in writing about me, because Todd Brenner meant them as a wall, and I climbed them like a ladder. I did one more thing, and then I'll let you go. I took $250,000, the exact size of the bonus Todd was paid for carrying my work up a flight of stairs, and I endowed a scholarship at Carnegie Mellon in the name of Walt Maddox, tool and die machinist, for first-generation students in engineering who come from towns like Youngstown, from fathers who checked the foreman's math out loud. The first recipient starts in the fall. I sent her a note with the award, and I sent her one other thing, because I have 2 of these now, and my father would have wanted the working one to keep working. I sent her his brass slide rule, the K&E Desalon he bought used in 1974 for $11, with a card that said only what he told me. Numbers don't get intimidated, people do, so be a number. I kept the mug. It's on my desk right now, cold coffee and all. If a man ever tells you that you're a builder like it's the ceiling of what you are, let him. Then go find out who owns the room.